So good morning, everyone. Welcome to this Workforce Wednesday webinar. My name is Kirsten Bayer with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support at Illinois State University. Thank you for joining us this morning. Today's topic is strategies for providing crisis intervention and the importance of confidentiality in the workplace. And we are joined by our presenter, Jamie McCammon. Hopefully I didn't butcher your last name, Jamie. I apologize. And we are excited to welcome her to the Workforce Wednesday webinar series. She is a new presenter for us, so we're excited to welcome her today. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started with her. You are on the Zoom webinar platform, which is a little bit different than Zoom meeting if you're not accustomed to it. So you as an attendee do not have the ability to unmute yourself or turn your video on. And that is purposeful, just for recording purposes. This is more of a presenter audience formatted platform. And we will have opportunity for Q&A. And so we just ask that you type any comments or questions into the chat or the Q&A. I just went ahead and opened the chat for everyone. I apologize. My settings always like to close it to you all. So I went ahead and opened it. So you should be able to type in the chat now, say good morning to us. And then any questions or comments you have, feel free to type those in the chat or the Q&A, and I'll help Jamie facilitate those at the end of the presentation. Today's webinar is being recorded and it will be posted on our Illinois Workforce Academy website. And we will also have Jamie's slides too available for you. Tomorrow, you'll receive a follow-up email from Zoom, and it will have the URL link where you can access Jamie's recording and slides, as well as a follow-up survey. The follow-up survey is only about 5 questions, and we do encourage you to participate in that. I sit on and help support staff, the WIOA Professional Development Committee, which has representation from all 4 core title partners, as well as local representation from local LWIAs, CBOs, and employers that sit on the WIOA PD committee. And we all determine what Workforce Wednesday webinars look like, what topics we do. And we use those surveys to really help us understand if we're meeting the system where you all are at, and meeting the needs of the system and making sure we provide correct, accurate, and beneficial PD to you all. So I highly encourage your participation in that follow-up survey. I'll try to put it in the chat towards the end of the webinar as well, because I know for me, I am bad about taking follow-up surveys unless it's like right after the event that I'm doing it on. So I'll try to do that towards the end of the webinar too. So yes, I'm sorry, I'm just reading the chat. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for saying good morning. So yes, this will be recorded. You'll get that information in the follow-up survey. I do ask that you allow for 48 business hours for the recording to be posted. We'll get the slides posted right away, but the recording sometimes takes a little bit to edit, so just allow us that time. And yeah, I think that's it. So we'll start off with our beginning polls that we do every Workforce Wednesday webinar. So if you could answer for us, where is your local area this morning? So if you're located in Chicago, Northern Illinois, Central, Southern, or statewide, we would appreciate that feedback. And we'll give everyone about 30 seconds to roughly a minute to answer. We had someone ask in the chat if there are CEUs. For this webinar, we do not offer direct CEUs, but we do offer certificates of participation, which I'm happy to provide you, and we'll put on the certificate that this was a 90-minute webinar, and you can submit that for a CEU under Illinois State University, and we haven't had any issues with those getting accepted, so you should be able to do that. Just email me directly if you would like a certificate of participation. I'll go ahead and put my email in the chat. Awesome, Lori. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end that poll and share their results. Looks like we have a good span across the state. Most of the representation of the audience is from Chicago, Northern, and Central Illinois, and even 5 people who are statewide. So thank you for sharing that with us. And then the next beginning Workforce Wednesday webinar poll is just which partner do you best represent? So if you best represent Title I, Adult Dislocated Worker and Youth Programs, Title II, Adult Education and Family Literacy, Title III, or Title IV, or other WIOA partner and stakeholder, or a state or local workforce innovation board member. And we'll give everyone a couple seconds to answer that poll. And while those are still trickling in, I see that we had a few more attendees join us. So we're just doing our beginning Workforce Wednesday webinar polls. And just a reminder that this webinar is being recorded and the slides and recording will be available to you. Okay, I'll go ahead and end that poll. Looks like pretty much everybody has participated. I'll share the results. So most of our audience is from Title I or an other WIOA partner and stakeholder. We have a few people from Voc Rehab, a few people from Title III, and a few people from Title II Adult Ed and Family Literacy. So that is a great span of meeting the state in all four core partners as well as outside of it. So thank you for that feedback. We do look at that for analytical purposes and then just also helps us make sure that we're meeting all the titles needs for professional development. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Jamie to introduce herself as the presenter and get her presentation started. If anybody needs anything, tech support, or has any questions about logistics for today's webinar, feel free to type it in the chat or the Q&A, and I'm happy to respond to you. Jamie, take it away.
Good morning. Hi, everybody. I'm excited to be here and share this topic with you today. Just a heads up, I've got some allergy stuff going on, so my voice is a little scratchy, but I'm going to do the best I can. So I want to talk with you today about strategies for providing crisis intervention and the importance of confidentiality at work. Next slide. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker in private practice mental health. I went to Millikan University and graduated in 2004, and then went on to get my master's degree at University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana in 2007. I've worked in residential treatment. I've worked in community mental health, public health, group private practice, and I currently have my own private practice mental health. And I've been in the field of mental health for 17 years. I have been trained and done a lot of training with trauma, with eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is a therapy approach to treating trauma. And I have a lot of work in working with clients who present with complex trauma. I've also been trained to treat obsessive compulsive disorder, and I work a lot with teenagers and adults. Next slide. So after we talk today, I hope that you'll be able to identify symptoms of trauma and common mental health presentations, to be able to recognize the importance of confidentiality if somebody, an employee comes to you with a struggle, to become aware of barriers for your employees to seek support, and to walk away with some ideas and some strategies to help employees who may be struggling and come to you. Next slide. So when I was putting this together, I was kind of thinking about, like, why does this topic matter? Why does it matter to me? And in my role as a clinician, I have worked with many people who've struggled at work with their mental health and needed to navigate some time away or to get accommodations. And they come in contact with some barriers to that. It's been challenging for some of them. So I hope to just kind of share some experiences from the field to help you all get perspective from my end of the therapy couch, so to speak. And then, my own, I've had my own adverse experience in work when I first started out. Not to go into details about what happened, but there was an experience that happened. I brought it to administration, it was dealt with, but I was told I couldn't talk about it to anybody. So I felt very isolated and alone and struggled with what had actually happened. There was no linkage to services. There was no follow-up with me. I just was in it and alone. And it was actually a friend of mine who's a clinical social worker who was like, hey, like maybe some EAP would be good for you right now. And I didn't even know that was an option. So just thinking about my own experience, it would have been so beneficial to know that there was um, that it was okay to struggle, that it was okay to follow up, and even have the administration check in on me after that event. I like this statistic just to illustrate, mental health problems can be long-standing for some people. Many people go 11 years between onset of mental health struggles and actually getting treatment. So it is possible that you're going to run into employees who are struggling. Next slide. So why do we want to be talking about mental health and work? There's some estimates that we spend about 90,000 hours in our jobs over the course of our lifetime. So it's a lot of our life. An employee's mental health affects their work, and their work affects their mental health. Poor mental health can affect physical health, leading to more time off work. And burnout and stress affect productivity and overall profit for the employer. More turnover can be linked to burnout, and burnout can stem from employees feeling like nobody cares about them. They're just a cog in a wheel. So mental health is important when it comes to work. Next slide. A 2021 survey from Cleveland Clinic, which I've also linked in the last slide, indicated that 76% of employees have at least one symptom of a mental health condition. That's quite a bit. And of that 76%, 84% of respondents indicated at least one thing about work was negatively impacting their mental health. So again, work impacts mental health, and mental health impacts work. Another survey from 2024 found that 92% of employees found it was important for an organization to support employee mental health and to work for a place that values their psychological well-being. So this matters to your employees. Next slide. So there are work situations, work conditions that negatively impact our mental health. One is no paid sick leave. So if a person feels like they have to choose between a paycheck and coming to work or staying home and taking care of themselves or their family, that's going to cause more distress. People may choose to come to work when they're sick. People may choose to, if they come to work sick, that spreads illness. That can lead to labor shortages, poor work performance, low productivity at work. A lot of folks have to work night shifts or rotating shifts. Some estimates say a fifth of our workforce in the US does shift work, and sleep is impacted by shift work. When a person is not getting adequate sleep, it affects their concentration, it affects their mood, which can also put a person at risk for depression. Having unpredictable pay or job insecurity can also lead to more distress when a person doesn't feel like they're going to be able to meet their basic needs or their commitments. It can worsen or lead to anxiety and depression symptoms. And having instability in work limits the benefits of working, such as time and structure to their day, social contacts that they get through work, having a sense of purpose and meaning in their life, and who they are within their job and who they are within their community. Inflexibility in their work can also lead to psychological distress. Being unable to easily change a schedule. People feel less anxious when they can feel like they can reduce their work hours or use hybrid work from home options or take time off if needed. And one way that this might impact your employees is many employees have to do therapy during their workday. Not all therapists offer evening hours or have evening hour availability. So they may be taking their lunch hours, they may be taking the morning and going to therapy and talking about hard things, and then coming back and trying to transition back to work. So just kind of keeping those things in mind too for your workforce. A person feeling like their workload is too heavy can lead to burnout and exhaustion. If a person feels like they cannot manage their workload, they may become less efficient, which can again lead to loss in the company. Poor pay can lead a person to feel stressed about money and work, which can put them at risk for depression and anxiety symptoms. There can be sort of this pressure to make more to cover their expenses, and they just feel kind of stuck in that. And lastly, even in 2025, after going through the pandemic and talking about mental health and having more awareness about how mental health is affected by a lot of things, there still is a lot of stigma around having a mental health condition. And lastly, issues in the workplace like gossip, hostility among colleagues, retaliation, or politics of the organization or politics at large can impact mental health. So I'm thinking of somebody I've worked with who works in an organization. Many of the colleagues hold specific political views and listen to political news radio or talk radio stations out in the open. And this person doesn't align with those political views, and it's quite distressing to hear that constantly throughout their day. And there's a fear of retaliation if they speak up. Next slide, please. So what helps a person who's struggling? First of all, if you notice a behavior, check yourself about assumptions. It's helpful to try and seek understanding. What's going on behind that behavior? Using empathy can be helpful. Empathy is this idea that we can try to emotionally understand another person's experience and see things from their point of view. And keeping in mind, putting yourself in their shoes. How would you want to be treated if you were the person struggling? It can be helpful to create safety for the person who's struggling. That can look like a lot of things. That can look like talking to them in a private area where they are not around their colleagues, instead of talking to them in the break room or talking to them on the floor, the production floor. It might mean turning off political radio. Fostering a supportive environment can be helpful. And that can look like making accommodations for the person, maybe adjusting their workload or assigning alternative duties. Things like posting informational posters about mental health or resources. I like the NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, .org. Again, that's linked at the end of this presentation. They've got a lot of really great downloadable and printable graphics discussing mental health and resources. So even just posting things like that can help people feel like it's okay to talk about it. It's important to protect from harm and provide psychological safety. So protection from harm may look like if this is a dangerous job, taking safety precautions seriously, not just making it something that we say but don't do. And psychological safety can look like, can I be myself here? Can I show up as I truly am? Can I take risks? Can I express ideas? Can I participate in decision making? Having work life, oh, I missed one. Connection and community can help. So fostering a sense of inclusion, teamwork, and trust within the organization helps employees feel cared about and seen. Having work-life harmony helps. Recognizing that employees have lives beyond work and their lives are more than just their work. That can look like respecting boundaries around vacation time, sick leave, paid time off, and other boundaries between their professional and work life. When a person feels like they matter at work, that can also benefit their mental health. That can look like paying them fair wages, recognizing accomplishments, when it's appropriate, empowering them to be part of the decision-making process in your organizations. And lastly, providing people with opportunities for growth and a path forward. Professional development helps so much with our mental health when we feel like, we're not stuck and we're growing and we're learning. Next slide. I like this quote. Again, kind of just speaking to the idea of notice the behavior and seek understanding, that people do well when they can. And if they're not doing well in their work, what is going on behind that behavior you're seeing of poor production or poor productivity? Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about types and rates of mental health struggles. This information, again, comes from NAMI.org, and you can find out more information there. This is not an exhaustive list of all mental health disorders. These are some of the top, most common ones that you might see. So I want to talk a little bit about how common it is and then what type of typical presentations and symptoms you might notice. So first is anxiety disorders, and about 1 in 5 people every year are dealing with anxiety. Anxiety encompasses a lot of things, including generalized anxiety disorder, which is anxiety lasting at least 6 months over a variety of topics and a variety of worries. There's also social anxiety disorder, where a person might experience difficulty in social situations, nervousness, inhibition. There's panic disorder, where a person experiences physiological symptoms of anxiety in the body, racing heartbeat, trouble breathing, feeling shaky, feeling that the worst thing is going to happen, are all kind of classical symptoms of panic. And phobias, and these are kind of irrational fears that just don't make sense, but then causes a lot of distress and avoidance in the person. And this can look like phobias of heights or snakes or small spaces. So with anxiety disorders, people can experience a lot of avoidance, inhibition, lack of confidence. Internally, there can be a lot of apprehension, dread, feeling tense and jumpy, feeling restless, irritable, really having a sense that the worst thing is going to happen at any moment, and just constantly looking for danger. Internally, they can have racing heartbeat, shortness of breath, sweating, tremors, headaches, fatigue, trouble sleeping, upset stomach, needing to use the bathroom more frequently. And symptoms can vary in severity. Some people experience times where they feel better and times where it is a little bit more distressing for them. Next slide, please. So major depressive episode occurs 8.3% in the adult population in any given year. Major depression is classified as changes in functioning day to day for at least a 2-week period. Those changes can look like changes in your sleep, sleeping too much, not sleeping enough, lack of concentration and focus, loss of energy, lack of interest in typical activities that you would enjoy, a sense of hopelessness or guilty feelings, maybe feeling like they're slowed down or agitated, having physical aches and pains, and sometimes even suicidal thoughts. Next slide, please. Post-traumatic stress disorder occurs 3.6% of the time in any given year. So with PTSD, there's 4 criteria that somebody would meet to be considered to have post-traumatic stress disorder. First, there's a re-experiencing, where a person may have flashbacks, where it feels like they're reliving the situation, intrusive thoughts about the situation. These thoughts come up about what happened. It intrudes on their awareness. They may have bad dreams. Secondly, there's an avoidance piece, where a person tries really hard to stay away from places or objects that would remind them of what happened. There can be thinking or mood changes. A person may have trouble remembering an event or parts of the event. There can be negative thoughts about yourself or the world. There can be a sense of numbness or guiltiness. A person may feel worried and depressed and may feel like they're not in their body or reality isn't real. And lastly, there can be changes in their level of arousal. A person may get stuck in hypervigilance where they're constantly watching and waiting for the shoe to drop. They may have trouble sleeping, or they may have outbursts of anger. It is worth noting that trauma is very subjective. So one person can experience a traumatic event and wind up with post-traumatic stress disorder, and another person can experience that same event and not have any trauma symptoms. In trauma treatment, we like to think about trauma as kind of two categories: big T trauma, where it's like war or bad car accidents or abuse. But there can also be trauma stemming from little t trauma, which doesn't make it any less significant, but those can be things like bullying or poverty, where a person doesn't feel like they can get their needs met on a consistent basis. So again, it's very subjective, and this is where it can be so helpful to kind of check some of those assumptions about a person's struggles. Trauma can also come with a lot of shame, which is, again, can make it really difficult and really vulnerable to talk about. So keeping those things in mind if you're working with an employee who's been through a traumatic event. Next slide. Bipolar disorder is another common mental health disorder that occurs in 2.8% of the adult prevalence. So with bipolar, we typically see shifts in mood from depressed to hypomanic or manic. So we see these swings from low to high. And symptoms and severity of that can vary, but there's distinct periods of time where a person can be in a hypomanic or a manic state and be in a depressive state. There can be periods of time where a person doesn't have symptoms and they're doing a lot better. And there can be periods of time where a person is in a mixed state where they're both in hypomania, mania, and depression. So it can look like a lot of different things. Hypomania and mania is defined as more of an upswing, if you will, in the mood, where it's more expansive, euphoric, or even quite irritable. It's thought that hypomania doesn't quite go as high as full-blown mania. So it's almost like a person's in depression and then they come up for air and they feel a little bit better, but then they cycle back down into depression and then they come back up and feel a little bit better. Whereas mania, they may be in depression and they swing all the way up into mania. Mania is characterized as unpredictable behavior, impairment in judgment, impulsivity, more risk-taking, and sometimes suicide concerns. So a person who's in a manic state might talk more rapidly, may have trouble slowing down or even pausing to take a breath. They may show signs that they're more productive at work, just having this goal-directed behavior, like they're driven internally or like they're on fast forward. They may have periods where they need little to no sleep. An hour or two feels good and they're rested. But mania and hypomania don't last, and a person can often fall into the depression, which can be quite debilitating. With depression, as I've already covered in the previous slides, there can be sleep issues, feeling overwhelmed in decision-making, changes in appetite, changes in functioning, and again, suicidal concerns. Not everybody who is bipolar will have a suicide event, but it's something just to keep in mind. Next slide, please. So obsessive compulsive disorder occurs in 1.2% of the population in any given year. Obsessive compulsive disorder is classified as presence of obsessive, intrusive, distressing thoughts that don't align with who the person is, and the presence of compulsive behaviors or rituals that are meant to lessen that distress that those intrusive thoughts bring on. Oftentimes the compulsions don't make sense. They're there, but logically they don't make a lot of sense, but the person feels compelled to do these things. Typically, symptoms last at least an hour a day and greatly affect daily life. So classic OCD is contamination fears, fears of germs, fears of getting sick. And so a person might excessively wash their hands to the point where their hands are raw and bleeding and chapped, and it takes up a lot of their day. But OCD, I want to mention, can also be where it's not so classic. And maybe it's more intrusive thoughts that are hard to talk about or hard to verbalize. People can have, for instance, harm OCD, where they constantly fear that they're going to hurt somebody else, but they have no intent to hurt somebody else. And this causes so much distress. And some of the compulsions can be more internal, where it can be rumination of thinking and analyzing and going over and over and over and trying to answer the question of, would I really hurt someone? And so it can be kind of an invisible compulsion, but it's still taking up a lot of their mental bandwidth and a lot of their time in their day. Next slide, please. So I don't treat substance abuse, but I think it is worth noting that substance abuse can co-occur with many mental health diagnoses. Substance abuse is a chronic disease where people compulsively seek and use drugs or alcohol despite harmful consequences. And relapse is very common because of changes to the brain due to the drug and alcohol use. Symptoms of substance abuse include withdrawing from family or friends, sudden changes in behavior and functioning, engaging in risk behavior, having tolerance to the substance or alcohol and withdrawal symptoms, and needing more and more of the drug to function. Substance abuse, as well as many of these mental health disorders, come with a lot of shame and stigma. And just again, keeping in mind that it can be hard for people to come forward and say, I'm struggling and I need some help. Next slide, please. So let's talk about why it might be hard, some barriers to seeking help. I've mentioned the stigma and shame that even in 2025, we've come a long way, but we still have some work to do to lessen the stigma. Privacy concerns. People may be concerned, if I tell you this, will it be kept confidential? Fearing that speaking up may affect their job or promotional opportunities. If I tell you about this, will you see me as competent? Will you trust that I can do the job if I'm promoted, if I'm struggling with a mental health disorder or substance abuse? There can be fear of retaliation or punishment. I've seen this with some of my clients that if they go off work, somebody else has to cover their work. And so they fear that others may be upset with them or angry. There can be fear of punishment if a person's struggling with substance abuse. They may fear, I have to go to rehab, which can feel like punishment, even though it's not. They may fear, I'm going to be locked away. I'm going to be taken to a psych ward and locked away and never released, even though those fears may not be based in reality. The culture of the organization can make a difference. I've worked with a female client who worked in a male-dominated field, and it was difficult for this person to come forward and say, I'm struggling with my mental health, because the culture of the organization was, we push through, we get our work done. We don't talk about those kind of things. So the culture can make a difference. Adverse consequences in the case of substance use. So having to face their addiction, having to go to treatment, a person may not want to or be ready to do that. And it can be incredibly vulnerable to come forward when you're struggling with your mental health. I think it's worth noting, administration or HR's response. And are you available for them to come forward? I've known of clients who have sort of virtual HR staff. And so a lot of conversations have to take place over the phone or over email. And when these conversations are really vulnerable conversations, a person may not feel comfortable doing that. So are you Are you there? Are you available? And then, considering how other people have been treated within the organization when they've had a mental health or an addiction struggle. Was there retaliation? Was there gossip? Was there a lot of questions about where the person's been when they've come back to work? Next slide, please. Just a little bit more on confidentiality. So a person who comes to you with a struggle, who knows that you're going to keep it confidential, helps them feel more comfortable and confident in speaking up. Knowing it's kept private ensures a sense of safety when things feel very unsafe in their world because of their struggles. It's important to consider your role if there's any legal or ethical considerations for confidentiality. In my own role as a licensed clinical social worker, I'm bound by my ethical code of conduct and legal laws about confidentiality. I can't share things unless there's a release of information or a safety concern. So really knowing and understanding what your role says about your limits as well. Knowing information will be confidential helps build trust with the administration and with the organization overall, and helps with employee retainment. And then again, just kind of reflecting on your own life and any times you've struggled. What's helped you and who's supported you? And what about that person's intervention was helpful? Next slide, please. So I want to note that there are resources and protections for employees. This is outside of my scope to go into in depth. So I'll just say contact HR to find out more in your organizations. But there is Family Medical Leave Act. Medical includes mental health. So a person can take, I believe, up to 12 weeks away from their job, consistent or even intermittent leave, and their job is protected while they are out caring for their physical or their mental health. And that also includes the physical and mental health of their family members. There's also short-term disability options. In my experience, my clients have had to navigate that with outside insurance companies. And that can be a little bit of a barrier and a little bit of a challenge to navigate, as these companies want specific documentation and records validating that they need this time off. There's also resources like employee assistance programs. These are benefits that some employers offer where a person can get counseling for a limited time free of charge to them or at reduced cost. And typically employers partner with specific clinicians in the area to provide those services. There's also community mental health resources and private mental health practices in many areas. Telehealth has made it really great that if a person's in a rural area, they can still access care using telehealth. I think that's one benefit that's come from the pandemic. Next slide, please. There are national resources as well. As I mentioned, the National Alliance on Mental Illness provides great resources and research, statistical information, diagnostic information about mental illness, and really great graphics that you can print and use in your organization. There's also the 988 Suicide and Crisis Hotline. It's a national hotline where a person can call or text 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and connect with a human. And that human connection can be just a lifeline for people when they're struggling. There's also the SAMHSA.gov, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, where you can learn more about substance abuse, rates of it occurring, treatment options, resources, and things like that. The National Institute of Mental Health provides a lot of great research and resources. And there are also local chapters of Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Al-Anon, which is for family members of a person who's using alcohol or drugs to get support, and Celebrate Recovery groups, which kind of gives support with more of a religious focus to it. Next slide, please. So let's talk about how to support your employees who may be coming to you with a mental health crisis. First of all, being able to listen effectively is so important. And just being aware of your own assumptions about the person or their own and the person's struggles is a really great place to start, kind of checking those assumptions at the door. Be aware of your own values and how it affects your ability to be present with that person and understand and relate to them. And notice any countertransference. And what this means is like your own emotional reaction to the person who's seeking help. What this can look like is if a person comes to you with a situation that's similar to something you've experienced, being careful not to jump in with your own solutions that have worked for you. They may not work for that other person, and that's what we call countertransference. Next slide. Other listening considerations include being aware of how silence may communicate disinterest. That may not be what you're trying to communicate. A person may use silence when they're listening really intently or when they really don't know what to say. But overly using silence may show that person coming to you that you just don't want to hear about it. So that's where using encouraging statements or encouraging words to keep the person talking. If they pause, it might be something like, uh-huh, or tell me more, or I hear you, or what was that like for you? Those are kind of encouraging statements. Limit distractions can help with listening. So turn your cell phone off or close your door. Turn off your office phone, turn off your computer, just really limiting anything that would take your attention away from the person who's with you really struggling. Paying attention to what your face says. You know, a person might be scowling, really deep in thought and concentration. What is your frown saying to that other person? What might that be communicating? Similarly, body. I'm sorry. Yes, my voice. Let me take a drink. Probably allergy stuff here. So one moment. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I will try and speak louder. Paying attention to your body language also is important. So, sitting with your arms folded might communicate you're not interested, or, chin on your wrist might show disinterest versus, your arms down at your side and hands relaxed might communicate more openness and interest to a person. Okay, next slide. Other listening considerations include using open-ended questions. And those are questions that tend to start with who, what, where, when, how, and why, instead of questions that can be answered with one word or yes or no. So it kind of elicits a little bit more information from the person and encourages their disclosure. Using summary phrases when there's a pause in conversation can be helpful. It's reflecting back to the person what you heard them say and checking for understanding. And those phrases can be phrases like sounds like, or I'm hearing you say, so in other words. Paying attention to the person's verbal and nonverbal cues is important, and trying to accurately label the other person's emotions. So you're kind of tracking what's being said as well as what's not being said. You're trying to think about what this emotion might be in this person. It helps build empathy and rapport and encourages the other person to express emotion and describe their experience. So a person that comes in and has elevated voice and is gesturing wildly and is speaking rapidly, you might reflect and say, gosh, it sounds like you're so angry about this. Is that how you're feeling? Or, I can see how nervous you are. You don't want to assume again, it's just kind of checking in. Like, I'm curious, are you feeling nervous about this? And that can help diffuse anger, foster compliance, and avoid arguments or confrontation. Next slide, please. So let's try and avoid these type of statements. Things that would invalidate a person's experience. Could have been worse. Others have it much worse. Those things just feel really bad and really don't encourage the conversation. Assuming you know how the other person feels should be avoided. None of us can know exactly what another person's experience is. So avoiding I know how you feel statements. Instead, things like, I'm wondering if you feel, or I'm curious if this might be your experience. Or what's this like for you might be more helpful kind of statements. We want to avoid confronting the person when they're coming to you. It's just not the time and place. And avoiding religious platitudes that kind of fall flat. You know, God won't give you more than you can handle, especially if the person isn't religious. It kind of is a conversation ender. And then attempting to share your own struggles and relate to the person. It's not really the time, even if you've been through something similar. So a person says, you know, I'm really struggling with this thing, jumping in with, well, that happened to me. Let me tell you what happened and what helped me can really just feel invalidating to a person who's struggling. Next slide. So when a person's in crisis, I like to think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs here. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a motivational theory about human needs. And it suggests that we all have needs. We have physiological needs for air, food, water, shelter, clothing, and sleep. We have safety and security needs, love and belonging needs, self-esteem needs, and self-actualization, becoming our best self at the very top of the pyramid. And we need to start with meeting our basic needs first. We can't become our best self if we don't have food and water and safety and people around us. So when a person is struggling and they come to you for support, thinking about how can I meet their basic needs first? Maybe get them a glass of water or something to eat, a blanket if they're cold, or find a private place to have this conversation. So again, safety and security needs. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I want to talk to you about what to do if a person comes to you and is struggling. I'm referencing a type of psychological first aid called SAFER, which is a model of crisis intervention. It's not necessarily a step one, step two, step three sort of thing. You're just kind of incorporating these ideas into your conversation with the person. So SAFER represents stabilize, acknowledge the crisis, facilitate understanding, encourage effective coping, and recovery or referral. And you can read more about it in the article that I've linked at the end, Everly from 1995, if you're interested. Next slide. So in the stabilization phase, you know, in this part of it, you're starting with kind of introducing yourself, working on building rapport and trust with the person, and describing your role, you know, who you are and why you're talking to them, and any limits to your ability to help. Next slide. You're acknowledging the situation by letting the person tell their story about what happened. And you're starting to sort of think about, as they're telling their story, what ways might you be able to help this person? Next slide, please. In facilitation of understanding, you're working with using empathy and reflective listening strategies, all those good listening strategies we just talked about, to get information and get an understanding of what the problem is. You're also normalizing the response. Of course, they're struggling. Anybody would be struggling in this situation. This is really hard. Your response is normal. And that can feel really validating and soothing to a person who's in crisis or has been through trauma. And offering reassurance as appropriate. We'll get through this. We'll figure it out. Next slide. We're also working on encouraging effective coping, and that can look like a lot of things. Some examples, again, back to that hierarchy of needs. Do they need some water? Do they need something to eat? Do they need a safe space? Do they need connection with somebody? We're thinking about what local services or agencies or resources might be able to be linked up to help them. We're letting the person tell their story and express emotion, even if that emotion is hard to hear, as long as it doesn't cause further psychological pain. We're thinking about who's supportive in their life, who can come around them, who's been there for them, and how can we incorporate those people. Next slide. We're working to connect them with important information and give them a sense that they can handle this, that they can be efficient and they can have agency, that they are in control of something, and that can really help a person who's in crisis. If it's appropriate to problem solve, we're helping them consider all the options. What has happened, what has helped before, what resources, what choices do we have in this? If there's conflict with another employee or conflict in their home, what can be done to help resolve some of that conflict in the workplace, or what resources can they be linked with to help them with conflict in the home? And it's considering, are there any spiritual beliefs that the person holds as a resource? Can they be linked up to their faith community as a resource as well? Next slide, please. Financial concerns can be a significant stressor. So considering, are there any community or workplace resources that can help if, for say, a person needs time off work or financial is impacting their work? Normalizing the feelings, again, helps the person know that they're not crazy. They're not too much, like this is hard. And fostering a sense of hope can be a lifeline for the person that this won't last forever. We'll make it to the other side of this crisis and we'll figure it out. Next slide, please. And then lastly, we're thinking about referral and assessing whether or not this person can go back to their job duties today, next week, next month, or if they need some time away. We're connecting them to resources, hotlines, counseling services, if that's appropriate. And we're educating them about their protections under FMLA and short-term disability where appropriate. Next slide, please. So I wanted to show you a little vignette that I found on YouTube, just a short 5-minute video about somebody that is actually using the SAFER intervention. And this just kind of demonstrates that you don't have to be a clinician to use this. These are just two ladies that have demonstrated how to do this. And I want you to listen for those good listening skills and see if you can kind of pick out some of the SAFER model in this vignette. Okay, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Shanae, and I was sent here to Heathrow Airport to assist with those who may have had loved ones or family members in the plane crash or the surrounding area where it landed. What is your name? My name is Erica. Erica, okay. And did you have a loved one or family member that was in or around the crash?
Yeah, my husband was on the plane.
Wow, I'm really sorry. I know this must be a crazy time for you right now, but I'm here to help. So if there's anything you'd like to share with me so I can better help you, just let me know.
Okay. So I heard about the crash on the news. I was watching it late last night before I went to bed. And I was watching it, it showed a lot of the footage. And then one part I saw my husband's briefcase. So, I knew he was on the flight and I saw his briefcase. So I know that he's alive. I just have that feeling. But it's still just really crazy. And, I want to go see him because I want to make sure he's okay. And I want to see that he's okay. I don't want to just talk to him on the phone. I want to see him. So just kind of a whirlwind. I just can't really believe that this is happening. So.
Yeah. Okay, so your husband was on the plane crash,
Mm-hmm.
and you saw his briefcase on the news last night, and that made you believe that you have hope that he's still alive.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, since the plane, you said that you wanted to go there, right, to see him, and that's completely understandable because I know just hearing his voice after something like this can just isn't enough sometimes. So, but for now, do you think going to Scotland is something that you can do right now, like tonight or today?
No, it's not really an option, but that if I could, that's what I would like to do. But
Okay. So, is there somewhere where you could stay tonight here in London that you feel safe and comfortable going to with something like this going on in your life right now?
yeah, my sister actually lives in town, really close to here, so I could stay with her.
Okay, that's a really great idea, and that's somewhere you feel safe.
Oh yeah.
Okay, awesome. Is there anything that you could do while you're at your sister's home that makes you feel comforted or is just kind of a healthy way for you to express some emotion? Is there anything that you do?
Well, I am a devout Catholic, so in times of especially stress, well, anytime really, I pray a lot, and I always use my rosary beads, which I bring them with me everywhere. So that always helps, just being in prayer constantly and having my beads with me.
Okay, that is something that could, I think, really be beneficial for you. And I can't imagine what you're going through right now, but I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me about this and to come up with a place for you to go tonight, at least, so you can gather your bearings and then possibly go to Scotland if need be. I'm so thankful that you have somewhere to stay tonight. At least for tonight, and that you can maybe come up with a plan there. And also, I just wanted to let you know that the emotions that you're feeling right now is very normal. This was a very traumatic accident, and so I want you to be safe wherever you are, to be in a safe environment, and to get to find the help that you need to either get to your husband or to get back home, whichever is something that you want to do. So I'm really glad that you came up with, praying and using your rosary beads, and that's a big comfort that you have. That is something that I really think can be very beneficial to you while you're going through this time. And I think that can be like a good coping mechanism for you. That just means it's a healthy thing for you to do when you're feeling overwhelmed or stressed.
Yeah.
Now, would you like for me to refer you to any outside help? I have the ability to do that here, and I just want you to have all the help that you need while you're in London. So, is there anywhere I could refer you to?
Yeah.
Or would you be okay with that?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Can I give them your name and number?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Erica. And I really wish you the best. And thank you for taking the time to talk with me. And I hope all goes well.
Thank you. I think.
Unmute myself. So again, it wasn't a perfect video. I appreciate the little puppy dog that joined in the background, but I heard a lot of good things in that she was connecting. Maybe she didn't do it perfectly, but just knowing that there's a person that hears you and is present can just be a lifeline for people. I heard reflection in the video. I heard some of those summarizing phrases, and connecting her to resources, validating her experience that this was a really difficult thing that she was going through. So I want to also just kind of touch briefly on suicide considerations. It is possible that you may have employees who feel suicidal and come to you with those concerns. So research does not validate that talking about suicide makes a person more suicidal. In fact, it's the opposite. Asking about it can be so protective, and just asking about it, frankly, are you thinking about suicide? Be present and listen to the person without judgment. That can really help in reducing suicidal thoughts too. It's again this sense that somebody sees me and somebody cares. And when a person is in a place of suicide, it can really feel sometimes like nobody does. You want to work on helping keep them safe, assessing for whether or not they have a plan, and reducing access to those lethal means. And you want to help connect them, calling or reaching out to the 988 crisis hotline, and supportive friends and family. You'll want to make sure that others are aware and that you let the person know that you're going to make sure others are aware. And then follow up. Ongoing support and contact can prevent suicidal action. So checking in, are you doing any better? Are you doing okay? How are you feeling today? Can really be a lifeline as well. Okay, so thank you for attending. I just wanted to take this time to open up to any questions or thoughts or comments, and I'll let Kirsten kind of manage that.
Great. Thank you so much, Jamie, for your time today and your expertise. We greatly appreciate it. We do have time for Q&A. So if you have any questions for Jamie, please feel free to type those in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll facilitate those to her. While you guys are thinking about any questions you'd like to ask her, I just want to reiterate that this was recorded and will be posted on Illinois Workforce Academy website. And then tomorrow you will receive a follow-up survey with that URL to where you can access the slides in the recording, a follow-up email, excuse me. And then also in that follow-up email will be a follow-up survey. That's 5 questions, just giving us feedback about today's presentation, as well as there is a question on there if there is a topic that you would like to hear more about for future Workforce Wednesday webinar. We would love to provide a presenter and a session on any topics that you feel like the system needs. Lori says, great presentation. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
And Lori also asked at the beginning of today's webinar if she could get CEUs for today. And we do offer certificates of participation. So if you need one from today, you can email me directly and I'll go ahead and put that in the chat. And I am happy to provide you with a certificate of participation. Maria said, thank you so much. Training is very informative, a lot of information.
I'm glad you were here, Maria.
And I'm just going to stop sharing for 1 second so I can get the follow-up survey for you all. Go ahead and put that in the chat. I know for me, I'm not going to take a follow-up survey unless it's right away. And we did have a question, Jamie. Are excessive nightmares also a sign of PTSD?
It can be, especially if they're trauma related nightmares. But it is very common for a person with PTSD to have nightmares. That can be kind of part of the re-experiencing part of the PTSD.
And I did go ahead, thank you, Jamie. I did go ahead and put the follow-up survey in the chat for you all. Thank you for the very informative presentation. I greatly appreciate this much needed information. This says Lori Graham. Somebody did type in the Q&A. Luis says, any recommendations in communicating mental health needs or barriers of job seekers with potential employers or training providers? A lot of them may not be equipped or even willing to address some of these circumstances appropriately.
So this is about somebody who's seeking a job?
Yeah, so I'm assuming Luis is a local, working at a local ALWIA, so I'm assuming that they are dealing with people who walk into the local workforce innovation areas looking for a position, and they assist them with getting employment. And so they're asking if you have any recommendations in communicating mental health needs or barriers that the person that they're helping to get a job has And how would they help the job seeker communicate that to a potential employer?
Oh, yeah. That I think is a little bit more tricky when a person's not been hired on. Because I think a lot of people struggle with fears of like if I say that I'm struggling in this way, then I won't get the job or I won't be seen as competent. Um, I'm not sure about that one because also too, you got to think about like privacy. I didn't cover this in this training, but Americans with Disability Acts and the privacy concerns and protections that a person has under ADA. Um, I'm not sure. I'd have to think about that one a little bit more.
And they're not required to disclose when they're applying for a job, are they? I mean, I don't believe so, right?
I would think that would fall under like private information. Like, when a person is applying for a job and interviewing, there's, certain things that people don't ask about and don't talk about, like the number of children you have, for instance, because sometimes that can make a person seem like they're less available for a job. So, um, I wouldn't think a person would have to disclose mental health issues, if they didn't want to.
Thank you for your expertise, Jamie. Um, Someone says in the chat, Lori says, thank you. The statistics were surprising.
Mhm.
Overall, wonderful presentation, great information to refer back to. And then we have another person who would like to remain anonymous, but says, thank you, Jamie. A staff person who shows ADHD symptoms with trouble focusing and bothering other team members. How do I assist them? There have been numerous meetings with this individual. They deflect and promise not to do it again. What's your advice for this manager?
Yeah, so I wonder if the person has been diagnosed with ADHD. It says they show symptoms and trouble with focus. The thing is, there can be several mental health disorders that look like ADHD, that look like inattention and can look like problems with focusing. So it's common to have problems focusing with anxiety, problems focusing with depression. Trauma can sometimes look like ADHD, where a person is just constantly re-experiencing in those hypervigilant states. So I think again, it's a good thing to start by not making an assumption if they haven't disclosed that they have ADHD. If they've disclosed they have ADHD, it might be good to check in, like how do you feel like your ADHD is affecting your ability to do the job? Um, have you sought treatment for ADHD? And I think you've got to be careful because this is again their private information and they may not want to share it. Um, but talking about behaviors, what you're noticing with this person, rather than things that are related to who they are, like you're an annoying person, rather than I notice you frequently um, go into your neighbor's cubicle and that disrupts their work, you know. So sometimes it's about planting seeds, planting seeds that maybe it would be helpful to go talk to a therapist about some of these struggles and how it's affecting your work. But we can't force a person, if they're an adult, to seek treatment. Um, I think if a person has been, if an issue has been addressed several times and there are no changes, then maybe there's some consequences that need to happen, or perhaps some accommodations. So if they're having trouble focusing, could they work in an area where there's less people? Or could they have an office with a door that shuts so they don't experience as many interruptions that get them away from their work? Could colleagues put a sign up on their door that says when they're available and not available? I have a sign on my door that says, please do not disturb, I'm in session. Um, So just kind of thinking creatively about like what sort of accommodations can be made to support the person, and support the rest of the colleagues, maybe. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. And just to add on to that, and also kind of a quick plug, we do have a webinar at 1 o'clock today, a Workforce Wednesday webinar at 1 o'clock, and it is about invisible disabilities in the workplace and how to navigate challenges and cultivating opportunity. And the two presenter, it's going to be like a panel, and the two panelists on there both have invisible disabilities, but they also both work for the state. So the two presenters are Andy Lasasso, who's the chief of staff for the Illinois Department of Human Services at DRS. And then Kathy Olson Tracy, who is, I believe her title is assistant director or maybe director. So excuse me if I'm getting that wrong, of adult education at the Illinois Community College Board. And they're both of our panelists for our 1 o'clock session. So I know that Andy's going to briefly touch about invisible disabilities and just disabilities and like ADA compliance as well. So if you're interested in hearing more about that and just their experiences themselves, they plan on being pretty vulnerable. So it's going to be a great session. And if you haven't signed up for that, I'm going to go ahead and put the link in the chat. It's at 1 o'clock today. Even if you can't attend, you can sign up and the recording will be sent to you. Okay. Adriana says, as related to job applications, mental health conditions are considered a disability, which is private information, and they do not have to disclose that. Yes, thank you, Katie. Kathy is the Senior Director for Adult Education and Literacy for ICCB. Thank you, Katie. Perfect. Let me check the Q&A here. It looks like we have a couple more. How often should crisis intervention happen with one person? And where's the line between crisis intervention and someone just venting?
So I think the safer model is kind of referring to like big crises, right? So something that happens in the workplace or something that happened outside of the workplace. I think it's thinking about, I don't know your role. So if a person's coming to you repeatedly, are you able to meet that need? Or is it planting a seed of, like, I hear how much you're struggling, and I don't really know that I have the skills to help you through this. Have you thought about seeing a therapist? Or have you thought about looking into EAP? So helpers are not just one helper. Helpers can be many helpers. It may mean that you need to have some boundaries with the person. Boundaries around when you can talk to them, or for how long you can talk to them, or for what you can talk about. And those can be some challenging conversations. I'm just kind of speaking off the cuff here, but I think if a person is not in danger, can they be encouraged to cope some on their own? Reflecting back to them, what has helped you before? The last time you were stressed about this, what was helpful? So it's kind of like, I use the analogy of like giving them back the ball so they can take the ball down the court and make the basket themselves. So empowering this person to problem solve. You don't have to take that crisis as your own to problem solve. You can let yourself off the hook, maybe good reflecting. That sounds really hard. What do you think will help? So it's kind of giving them back that ball to take down the court. Does that help?
Hopefully so. Yes. Thank you, Jamie. Any other questions or scenarios for Jamie and her expertise? Okay, I haven't seen any that else that have come in, so we'll go ahead and just kidding. There's always one last one, right? When I start ending. Um, Michelle says, is it okay if you see characteristics in a client that point toward mental health issues to tactfully suggest services they can use? I'm a career planner and I have difficulty indicating a deeper issue.
So I think the question, if I'm understanding it right, is like if you suspect a person's struggling in their mental health, to suggest maybe mental health services would be appropriate. I think, again, you're going to have to read the situation and understand your role and consider your rapport with the person. If it's the first time meeting with them, it may feel a little bit like, oh, like, who are you to suggest? Like, you don't even know me. But if it's somebody you've been working with and you've kind of seen over several conversations that there's these themes coming up, let's say anxiety, like they're just consumed with these anxious thoughts about what they're going to do about their career, and you've worked on some things and you've done some interventions and you're working on the career plan, and this person can't move forward, you might say, look, we've been meeting for a couple weeks now, and I'm just kind of wondering if you're really anxious about this. So again, you're not assuming, but you're having that curiosity, that wonder. And maybe they say yes. And you might say, have you ever thought about talking to a therapist about this? My role is to help you career plan, but I don't really know how to treat anxiety. It sounds like you're really anxious. So it can be a wonderful connecting piece. And it might just be that little nudge that a person needs to get into services and get some help. But I think, again, rapport and the nature of your relationship makes a difference.
Great. Thank you, Jamie. Any other questions? Just to reiterate, today's webinar was recorded and it will be posted on the Illinois Workforce Academy website. I'll go ahead and put that in the chat really quickly. So it'll be posted here on our 2025 Workforce Wednesday webinars. And the slides will be posted there as well. Again, if you do need a certificate of participation for today's webinar, you can email me directly. I'm happy to provide you one. I just put my email in the chat one more time. And if you have any follow-up questions after today's webinar, I am happy to connect you with Jamie or at least ask her myself. So if you would like to email me any of those, you're welcome to. And again, if this topic is still hot on your brain, feel free to sign up and join us for our 1:00 Workforce Wednesday webinar, where we'll be joined by Kathy Olson-Tracy and Andy Lasasso from ICCB and IDHS DRS to talk about invisible disabilities in the workplace. Thank you so much, Jamie, for your time and your expertise today. We really appreciate it. And everyone have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you, everybody.